Welcome to our Marketing to Engineers webcast, Lead Generation in 2016, Leveraging Marketing Automation and Content, sponsored by CFE Media and Be Found Online. To get the best results from the webcast platform, please make note of the following as you participate in today's event. If you are having technical problems with audio or the slide presentation, click on the question mark at the top right-hand corner of your screen to bring up a list of system checks to make before escalating to an online technician. If you're experiencing issues with your slides or audio, please refresh your browser or click the Refresh Media button directly under the presenter's headshot. You can control the volume settings of this webcast by adjusting the volume on your computer or by adjusting the volume on the webcast platform. If you need a technician, type a message into the Ask a Question box and someone will get to you as quickly as possible. Individual technical questions will be answered in the Answered Questions on the left-hand side of your screen. You can use the Ask a Question box on the left side of your screen to type questions for the speakers during the presentation for the Q&A session at the end. You may ask questions at any time during the presentation. We'll get to as many as time allows. Questions that are for today's presenters will be answered verbally during the Q&A session at the end of the webcast. To download the presentation slides, use the event resources on the left-hand side of your screen. This webcast is being recorded, including the Q&A session, and we'll send you an email message with a link to the archive version after it's ready. Today's webcast is brought to you by CFE Media and Be Found Online. I'm now happy to introduce today's distinguished speakers. As Director of Content Marketing Solutions, Patrick Lynch strives to collaborate with CFE Media's marketing partners to help them build successful content marketing campaigns for targeted engineering audiences. Using marketing engineers' research and content stream content, solutions are built on proprietary insight and professionally developed content from CFE Media brands and content partners. By focusing the content on the manufacturing, commercial construction, and industrial automation markets, the content marketing solutions Lynch provides help those companies trying to target the consulting engineer, plant engineer, and controls engineer. In 2009, Steve Krull partnered with Dan Golden to launch Be Found Online. As a bootstrapped startup, he often wore as many hats as he could find. Now that the agency has grown, Steve's responsibilities have shifted to providing support for broader agency initiatives, clients, and staff. Steve has pulled inspiration from this broader oversight to develop Be Found Online's complete online lead generation solution, which cost-effectively packages expertise from content marketing, paid search, email marketing, and marketing automation. When he is not working, Steve enjoys time with family, coaching Little League, and cycling. As a parent of a child with autism, he also gives his time freely to a variety of autism-related causes. Before we continue, please take a moment to remind yourself about dealing with technical issues during this presentation. I'll leave this slide up for a minute so you can read. And now we'll hear from Patrick Lynch. Pat?
Thanks, Kristen, and good afternoon, everybody. My name is Patrick Lynch, and as Kristen said, I'm the Director of Content Marketing Solutions at CFE Media. I'll go ahead and switch back to the starting slide here. So today what I'm going to talk about is some of the results from our latest Marketing to Engineers research study, which took a deep dive into the value that engineers place on suppliers' websites, what resources they find most helpful, what are the design elements that make their experience on the supplier website more enjoyable. We'll talk about some of the age differences and the demographic breakdown between the audiences, and we'll have a little bit of insight into the preferences that these engineers have for consuming content on your supplier website, and then we'll go into Steve's presentation on lead generation and how to actually capture some of that data from those engineers. So we'll go ahead and give a little background on the introduction and methodology of this research study. So this Marketing to Engineers research study we conducted, we had a little over 900 respondents to the survey. We collected data from May 21st through June 9th of last year. We offered them a $50 gift card as a potential winner of a participant drawing. So we did incentivize them, and we see that we had about a 3.2% margin of error. From a respondent profile standpoint, this is pretty typical of our research studies, where we can actually break down the job function and title of these engineers, also the number of employees, the age of the respondents, but also their industries, products that they buy or specify. And for this particular survey, we see that about 9% were of the C-level variety for job function, 39% were senior engineering management, and about 50% were actual engineers in terms of their job function and title. Their firm or the company that they work at had about 90 employees, and on average they were about 49 years old. Moving into the research here, when we asked the engineers how valuable are the following websites when seeking information on the latest engineering technologies, industry trends, and products, you'll see that search engines topped out at the very highest in terms of value. But following closely behind search engines, you'll see that supplier vendor websites, product databases, and trade publication websites were the next three most important websites for them. You see at the bottom of the list, YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter as kind of the social media contingency trended out near the bottom in terms of the value that an engineer placed on these social media platforms. So this type of question has been pretty consistent with our previous research studies on marketing engineers. I think the good thing for suppliers is the fact that engineers view your website as a valuable source of information. But the question is what types of information do they expect to receive from you when they actually get to the websites? And we'll kind of look into that here on the upcoming slides. We asked the engineers because everybody talks about how busy they are and how much people are on the internet today, how many emails they receive. We wanted to try to figure out, okay, well, how has your usage changed compared to 2 years ago? And we broke it down by a whole variety of attributes. But as you can see on this list, search engines, supplier websites, product databases, and trade publication sites, you see these top 4 or 5 items as increasing pretty significantly in terms of how much they use these websites when they're looking for engineering-related information. So that's the good news for us. On the right-hand side of the screen, you see those social media channels again, where they have either the teal blue or the orange color, which signifies less often or much less often in terms of their usage of these platforms compared to 2 years ago. So although social media is definitely a key cog in any, I would say, content marketing plan, you see that engineers, based on the last 2 slides, just aren't placing a high level of value on the content that they're receiving in these channels. And some of that can be changed with what content is shared there, but I think the research study itself shows that I think they've had experiences on those social media channels and they might not have been as positive, so they might have taken those social media sites kind of off their list of places to go when they're looking for engineering-related information. Moving into some of the breakdown of the design elements of a website, this one is a pretty much a no-brainer, where they want a user-friendly and a fast-loading website. Almost 100% said, yes, this is very important to me when I land on a supplier's website. And with that as kind of the segue, we'll go into some of those design elements that engineers said, when I visit a site, these are the things that I like. So in terms of how they arrive on a supplier's website, we asked the engineers, how did you navigate there? And we asked them to check all the boxes that apply. And you see that the engineers, almost 90% of them said, I use a search engine to find that website. So this would be finding your supplier website. You see 53% said they type it into an address or URL bar. They bookmark it in the browser. And then as you go down the list, you see their response rate or typical response rate to advertisements in print magazines, online ads, newsletters, and digital editions. Once they land on your website, this slide indicates basically their threshold for how much time they want to spend looking on your site for the relevant information, or the number of mouse clicks that they want to perform before they get to that information. And the way that you want to interpret this slide is that an engineer who lands on your slide, on average, is willing to give you about 4 clicks before they get frustrated with the search on your site and they leave your site completely. Or you have about 2 minutes and 8 seconds for these engineers to get to that information and find what they need before they get frustrated and leave the site. So 4 clicks or 2 minutes and 8 seconds, depending on which one is more important to you, is a good way to look at it. And if you think back to the previous slide where you say 90% of the engineers are finding your website with a basic, let's say, Google search, they're probably pulling up your main corporate site first. So as a kind of test experiment, go ahead and search for your main corporate site in Google, find that site, and count the number of clicks it takes for you to get to the information, as quickly as possible. Is it 2 clicks? Is it 10 clicks? I do think that it's something that we all should look at. We look at from the trade publication and media side of how can we get these engineers to the information as quickly as possible, because they are searching for your site. They're trying to find good information. They just might not be sure where it exists on your site. Moving into the next slide here, we'll talk about how they can increase the value of a supplier's website. So when we ask them, how do the following features contribute to your experience on the site, or what value do you place on these content types, you see that these engineers, as always, they need product information and specifications. But they also really like application articles, how-to videos, and even something as simple as an engineering calculator. Having access to a basic engineering calculator might be something that an engineer finds very useful. Almost 82% say, this is something that is very helpful for me, because if they're going to try to use your website as a resource to do their job better, that engineering calculator might come in handy for them. As we advance the slide, you'll see from a design perspective, engineers like an easy and open access to information. They don't necessarily like giving up their information to download content. When they're on the site, they do like the navigation, effective and easy to use, well-formatted content, fast load time. Some of those are self-explanatory. But if you look down at the bottom of the list for mobile compatibility, so 16% of those engineers who responded to this question said mobile compatibility was highly important to them. And we're going to have Steve Poole weigh in here in a second about how suppliers can get on friendlier terms with Google when it comes to their mobile compatibility. But this is kind of an interesting side note here about engineers. Yes, they believe that mobile compatibility is important, but it actually trended out for this particular audience a little bit lower, and we'll see how maybe that's a result of maybe a poor mobile design of a website, or maybe it's just, we're kind of late to change in the trend of more and more people using mobile searches to find their information. So we'll get Steve's feedback here in a minute. Lastly, kind of on this section, we look at the impact of a poor supplier website experience. So we wanted to try to quantify when an engineer has a poor experience on your website, what kind of financial impact will that have down the road? And it's a very hard thing to quantify, but we had them fill out what their effect level would be, and you can see that although 13% said they're not going to do business with that supplier, if you combine that with this moderately affects 55%, it's almost 70% of the engineers who responded to this question said, it's going to have a pretty significant impact on my decisions to do business with you. So it's almost a what's at stake, what kind of impact is this going to have if an engineer has to go 10 clicks to find the information when If you remember on the previous slide, 4 clicks was about what their threshold would be for trying to find the information. So it's an interesting, focal point of this research study is what's at stake if they have that bad experience. So as I move to the next slide, I'm actually going to have Steve Kuhl kind of weigh in on these last couple slides and just see if he has any feedback or any sort of tips and tricks as to what are some basic things that suppliers can do to maybe navigation-wise clean up their website, or even searchability from a mobile standpoint. What are some basic things that people should be looking at either in their reports, or maybe they can test on their site to see how enjoyable that user experience is on the website. So Steve, if you have any thoughts.
Thanks, Pat. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the webinar as well. When I think about vendor websites or websites in general, what I want to think about, and Pat showed some data earlier about how long they're going to hang around and how many clicks. I use the old Tootsie Pop Owl, and how many clicks does it take to get to what you're looking for on a site. If a majority of our traffic is coming in to get to the top of the site and they have to click from there. So think about your navigation in terms of what the user's looking for. At the end of the day, you want them either at a category level page where they can then broaden out and look for products, or at a product level page where they know what they want and they can get there. So when you're architecting your site, simplify the navigation. Let the user do the work to get in. Don't create 4 levels of menu and 5 levels of navigation and so many different links that they get confused. Make it obvious at the top of the site the various paths you want the users to choose, and then leave the breadcrumbs as they walk down. So as they move through a channel of the site, they can figure out where they're at, where they're going, and also know how to get back.
Thanks, Steve. Go ahead and advance the slide from our last couple slides here. So as I mentioned earlier, as part of our research studies, we do a lot of demographic analysis of age breakdown, industry breakdown, products that they buy or specify. And going back to some of the initial questions, we wanted to show you some of the more interesting stats of kind of the 40 and younger group and 41 or older. So when we asked this question, we did kind of an age comparison, and you can see that the 40 or younger group, which is kind of this lighter blue color, said that they actually find supplier websites almost 17% less valuable on that very valuable scale when compared to the 41 and older group. So it might be because the younger audience expects a little bit more out of website experiences. Maybe they're quicker to leave a website and go back to search because they feel a little more proficient with it. But you'll see as we advance to the next slide that in terms of arriving to a supplier's website, there's not much of a difference, right? So almost dead even for use search engine type website in the URL bar. So they're arriving to your website in almost the same way. But the problem is that when they arrive on that site, is it the right type of information? And as you can see, design-wise, they all like very similar things. They like very similar features of well-formatted content, easy and open access to information. But I would say the one takeaway from this is the mobile compatibility. You see that the younger 40 under 40 group is almost 13% higher when it comes to the value they place on a mobile-friendly website. So this kind of goes to the idea to make the experience simple, easy to understand. There is something about making this information accessible, but at the end of the day, there's a lot of similarities between these two age groups, and in future studies, we'll continue to do these types of demographic breakdown. As I advance the slide here and just kind of wrap up, for those on the line, we are going to have a Q&A session at the end, so anything that I didn't answer during these last few research slides, feel free to type it into the question box, and we'll try to get them answered at the end. If you do ask a question and we don't get to it today, we will respond directly with an answer to that question from either Steve or myself. But with that, I will turn it over to Steve to hear about lead generation in 2016. So, Steve, it's all yours.
There's the mute button. Hello again, everybody. What I want to do is I want to build on some of the research that Pat has provided you today. If we think about what users are doing, and you think about a majority of the users are going to the search engine, and then second to that, they're coming to your websites. How do we keep those users around? How do we educate and engage those users? How do we bring them back? So in a perfect world, there's a handshake and we become friends, and they ring me on the phone next week, and we've got a conversation, and we're getting a little closer to sell the product. Well, digitally, it's not that easy. But what we're doing now and what we're seeing in the market is we can make these things easier. We can have those conversations. We can foster that engagement. And when we think about the investments that many of you have made already in marketing automation, it's leveraging that investment to really engage that user, foster that relationship, bring them down that sort of sales cycle. And I'll call it a sales cycle. I'm a marketer, but at the end of the day, I want revenue from the end of this funnel. So let's talk a little bit about that, and we'll tie in some of what Pat had to say as well. But I'm thinking about this from a marketing perspective and how to create this general ecosystem that's going to take the users that you want to talk to, foster engagement, nurture that engagement, and drop them into Sales Lab as a better qualified sales lead. So the agenda that I have for today, and we're going to try and cram a lot in here, but I hope I don't go too fast, and I hope I haven't bit off more than I can chew here in the 20 or 30 minutes that we have together. And please do put any questions you have into the Q&A, and we'll get to as many as we can. And like Pat said, we will follow up with any of those questions that we didn't get a chance to answer. So quick look at the agenda. Hopes. It's really what I hope you'll get out of this today. Today's lead generation challenges. We all want more leads, or we want higher quality leads. How do we match those two up and get our salespeople quality leads and get them thinking that marketing is delivering really high quality leads, so they don't have to use the old excuse of, oh, these leads stink. Give us good leads and we'll close them. We want to fix that problem, and there are great ways and great technologies to address that. We'll talk about this new lead gen ecosystem, how we can separate some of this stuff, clean up some of our lead gen, and give those quality leads over to sales. And then we'll talk about some of the best practices and some of the strategies here in the space. So my hopes for you that you'll walk away from this is that you will have new ideas for your marketing programs, that you'll walk away and say, hey, you know what, I can plug this in over here on the left, or I can plug a little something in on the right, that you'll identify something in this cycle that you can do better to facilitate either lead quality or lead quantity. And then you have to realize that this stuff, it's not going to cost a fortune. You can do some things on a dime. You can make things work. And then the other thing I want you to think about here too is our marketing comes in silos quite often. I worry about my website over here, and I might pay for SEO. I might pay for display advertising in another way. I might do paid search marketing here. I might have all these different buckets and all these different responsibilities. I want to roll that stuff up. I want to stop looking at some of this as a media buy. What I want to look at is I want to look at the opportunity. So if I've got 4 or 5 different channels in which I'm spending money today, each one of those is responsible for a certain set of performance metrics or KPIs. What I want to think about in regards to those channels is how can I get those channels working together? At the end of the day, I want to know what it costs to get a lead, first of all, that first contact. I want to know what it's going to cost me there. The second piece is I want to know what it costs me to get a sales qualified lead. That's the one I'm going to hand off to sales. And finally, I want to know the cost to get a new customer, those people that actually sign contracts and we write paper for. I want those metrics. At some point, I always care about how much money I spent on Google, but there's a point where I've got to let my marketing team or my agency do the job of mixing my media to make this all work together that's most effective for my business. Let's go ahead and dive on in. We'll talk about the challenges of what's going on today. Think about this. These are just some different stats in terms of what's going on in the space. If we think about how much content marketing costs, how much B2B advertising costs, how many different things. Thinking about the challenges we all have and we all face, your number one challenge is probably leads or sales. And a lot of the folks we work with, the goals are based on sales, even though they're in marketing. So what they want to do is they want to get as many high-quality leads into marketing or into sales hands as they can, and they want to move those through the funnel. So we think about these challenges. We think about the technology purposes or technology purchases that we've made. How do we get these things working together with everything that we do to achieve the goal of more or higher quality leads? So what are some other challenges we face here? Homer Simpson with options. Our audience, and Pat talked about this, what different sources do they look at? What do they use when they're out searching? He talked about sites and social media, search engines. We get emails all the time. I think it's the time of year, and if I could ask for a show of hands, which I can't do on the webinar, but a show of hands of how many people are getting just crazy amounts of unsolicited email because it happens to be Q1 of the new year. Somebody's bought new lists and they've got new budgets, so they're trying to find which ones of us they can talk to. There's only so much value you can drain from that thing, and I keep getting those messages. Let's figure out how to have better conversations with people than buying a list of 10,000 names and sending emails to folks, right? So people have very short amount of time to think about new technologies and where they're going. Everybody on this call is insanely busy doing their job, trying to think about either what they have to deliver tomorrow or next week, thinking about their departmental or corporate goals. So when we're thinking about new technologies, I want to do it on my time and my pace. I don't like intrusions in my email because I've got plenty of email to deal with the way it is. I want to figure out better ways to do this stuff and figure out how this all works. So let's talk about how to get better leads from an improved ecosystem. So some of the challenges that we all face lead us to say, okay, how do I answer these questions? How do I address these challenges? And if I think about it, what I like to do, if everybody's invested in marketing automation, and what we find is that a lot of folks with their marketing automation investments, they are leveraging marketing automation to replace some of their email marketing, and they've done a little bit of nurturing. What a lot of people do is they'll add forms to their website, current pages, and then when they get a contact from that website page, they'll drop it into their HubSpot, Eloqua, or Marketo, and then they'll put it into a standard singular nurture stream that happens to be 4 or 5 steps long, or they'll put it in a general bucket if they don't have anything else, and they'll try and nurture that way. Folks that do have a hard time leveraging the investment in some of these tools, and we see it over and over again when we're asked to evaluate what's going on with my marketing automation, it's the fact that we don't have time. So we buy the tool, and there's a great reason for acquiring the tool, but sometimes it's the resources to manage the tool that we don't always think about. So there's some other pieces to this, and leveraging that marketing automation, it's not the answer. To me, it's part of the ecosystem. So if I think about the old way of getting traffic to a website and doing some of these things, it's I want to get traffic to my site, and I want people to fill out a form, and then I'm going to bother them, right? So as soon as they filled out a form, I bothered them, and I wanted them to fill out a sales or contact form that gave me enough information to act upon. And in the new way, we talk a little bit differently about this, where on the left side of this graphic you'll see that everybody's a stranger. I want to create some awareness. What can I do to create awareness? Pat and the folks at CFE do a great job in talking about content marketing. They've got fabulous products. And if I think about the family of sites, and I think about plant engineering and things, those are all content opportunities. They're advertising opportunities and content opportunities. I want awareness for my brand, my products. So out there in the awareness piece of this thing, I don't know these people. I've done my audience research and my homework. I know where I want to advertise or what I want to say, but I need to get those people to a destination. So in yesterday's model, I got those people to my website. And we still see it today where a lot of folks will bring them into a section of the website or even to the top of the website. And I absolutely believe that branded keywords in most cases should go to the top of your website so people can do their own search there if you're buying an ad. But if I think about other types of landing pages and I think about this ecosystem, I want to control the conversation with this user from their first click through their last click. And to do that, I need to leverage my paid media, my paid advertising, my marketing my content marketing in the middle of this, my marketing automation all together as one, because what this is going to give me is the opportunity to engage that user up front, nurture that user in the middle, and convert them at the end. So if I think about the way this thing is going to work, what do I want from a user? Historically, we've all added forms to websites. And my form is a contact us, or a speak to a representative now, or have somebody call you back. And I bet you could give me 2 or 3 examples each of websites that have great forms or websites that have horrible forms. The bottom line is that I don't care about forms as much today as I care about contacts. I can build trust with a user with a simple exchange. And that simple exchange is, I give you something of value, you give me your email address. And this is really at the heart of inbound marketing, right? I want to start establishing trust. So if I can get a user from a display ad, a content piece, or a paid search ad to get to a landing page that I've created specific for this campaign and not my general website, and I can get them to trade that information with me, I'm building my contact list. Now, what I want to do in there is I want to create multiple campaign types and segregate my users into those different buckets. And I want a user for product suite A, and I want a user for product suite B, because I want to market to those people differently. So I want multiple nurture streams in there. So if they've contacted me and given me an email address, I'm also doing something else in here, and that is I'm typically dropping a cookie. They're allowing me to follow them around a little bit because they've hit my landing page. Now I can also remarket to them to follow up with different things. I can put ads in different places. We won't get into too much in terms of remarketing, but the idea that I now have created contact with these folks and I can put ads in different places. I'm not going to be intrusive. I'm not going to be that annoying sales guy that puts an ad at every corner you turn. But that's the first piece, is that contact. They've given me contact, and they've given me the right to reach out to them again. So I'm going to send them the email or give them the download. That's step one. But then in my nurture stream, what am I doing? Am I going to send them to sales immediately? I have a client that wants to send everybody that's even an email contact over to their sales group so sales can try and close them. Is it wrong? I don't know if it's wrong. I would prefer doing it a different way, but because I think there's a better way. They've had success in the past. So am I going to be able to convince them that they need to do some more nurturing? Well, what they do instead is they modify this. They contact all of those people, and then what they do is the people that filter out of that, they move back into their nurture stream. So they try and email or call them with a salesperson. When they fall out of that, they bring them back into the nurture stream. And that may work for some of you as well, because then you can slowly nurture the folks, see if you can foster that engagement, and see if you can grow that trust. And at the end of this, in terms of thinking about getting to my conversion, my nurture stream is typically 3 or 4 steps, providing progressively more information for the user. Think about this. If the first click is a download where they've given me their email address and they're downloading, whether it's a top 10 list or a how-to article that's pertinent to their search and pertinent to the problem they're trying to solve, what am I doing with the rest of my nurture stream? Do I have 2 steps, 3 steps left? In most cases, we're not nurturing them well enough. We're not creating enough value at that next step. So after they've downloaded that first article, that quality content to create that first piece of engagement, I want to send a follow-up piece. So I know what they did. I know what they downloaded, so I know what they're interested in. So why don't I pull together a list of valuable resources? I've got content on my site. I've got product information on my site. Let's move up to the category level of my site and think about what I can package. Do I have a few videos? Do I have a few articles? Even third-party articles, if I send those, I'm creating value for this prospect at this point because I'm giving them information that they would have to go hunt for. I'm keeping them in my loop. So I think of this whole graphic here as my loop. I want to keep them engaged. If they come to my website via a search engine and they come to and they drop on a landing page on my website and then they leave, I've got no way to figure out who they were and if they're coming back. But if I can exchange that email for content piece through this campaign, now I can keep them in the loop. I can engage them. I know a little bit about who they are, and I can profile them. I can get more information about them along the way. If I'm in my second or third step of my stream, I can often ask them what their job title is or how large the company is they work for. And you guys know as well as I do that, about 70% of the emails we collect are Gmails and other Hotmail and even Yahoo still. But those are real people that work for real companies. if they're anything like me, they just don't want to give up their business email address right away. Doesn't mean they're horrible prospects. It just means I have to nurture them into giving up their business email at some point, or at least a phone number. So if I think about that, all of this stuff in the middle of here gets me closer to that conversion. So let's go ahead and talk about a nurture stream specifically, as that's sort of the big piece here. And I put Wally in here as an example. He's built to do one thing. And this nurture stream is built to do one thing. That's to take a contact and turn them into a sales lead. That's all I want to do with this thing. I can overbuild it and I can underbuild it, but my advice is test the heck out of this, because Susie's going to come to my site and she's going to download a white paper. What do I want to do with that? In yesterday's model, or even in some of the models that I see active now, Susie downloads a white paper and I don't do anything with Susie's information, even though I've spent a whole bunch of money on marketing automation. Well, what I want to do then is I want to take some time to educate Susie, and I want to validate Susie. Susie, give me some more information. We're getting to know each other. Why don't you share some of the details here, right? And then when trust is built, I've got to have an end to the stream somewhere, right? I can't go on forever. So I want to build some trust with Susie, and then eventually I'm going to say, hey, Susie, why don't you talk to our sales team? Or why don't you fill out this form? And guess what? If Susie fills out the form, great, she moves over to sales. If she doesn't, I put her back into the general population bucket so I can nurture Susie. I know she's interested in my company and my products. She's hung around for now, it's probably several weeks. Put her back into the other stream. Nurture her slowly on the other stream. So as this is an equation, and I haven't really talked much about the content marketing aspect of this. When we talk about some of the advertising channels to use, content and content marketing is huge. And I've said that we need content on those landing pages. The other part of it is we'll need content outside of those landing pages, and I'm thinking specifically on LinkedIn, a great place for this, and we'll talk about that a little more. But I think about this equation as I leverage my paid media advertising that I'm doing already today. I plug in some useful content into those ads. If I think LinkedIn sponsored content, and I get native advertising working there, I can get a little mind share from a user who's reading their LinkedIn newsfeed. And this stuff works. I know it works because we've seen it work. We've had it work for many clients. Images are worth 1,000 words in this case, but also even useful white papers and downloads as that first click option. But then really leveraging our marketing automation here gives us what we want. And I want performance. I want my lead gen to improve, my quantity and my quality. So I want that performance. So if I think about adding these things together, that's where this new ecosystem comes into play. I stop looking at each one of these as a separate marketing act. I'm looking at shared goals, because now if I were to jump back up to the flow slide, I can track and I can look through that entire ecosystem. If somebody clicks on an ad, I can track that. If somebody downloads a white paper, I can track that. Everywhere they're at in my marketing automation, I know what step they've taken. So now I have so much user information, I can control this ecosystem. So I look at this as, how much do I want to spend to acquire each lead? Forget about paid search, forget about display, forget about my content marketing program. If I can take this ecosystem, create a budget, I need 1,000 leads in 2016. I'm willing to spend, how much money am I willing to spend on those, right? Do I want to spend $10 a lead? Or am I willing to spend $100 a lead? You know how much your products cost. You know how much your margin is. Back into, take how many leads you need, and there's a sales conversion rate in this as well, back into how much traffic you need in this funnel. And then don't worry about, am I going to get it all from Google? Am I going to get it from here or there? Solve the problem by figuring out where the quality is coming from. Make sure you're creating awareness for the brand and the product suite, and then drive leads into this funnel, because then you can control this funnel. Don't get me wrong. People are going to leave the funnel and they're going to go to your website. Guess what? There's a silver lining there too. If they leave my funnel and go to my website, I'm still tracking them. So within my marketing automation suite, within my analytics platform, I can still see this user. So they're still on my website, so they went and did 3 things on my website and left my funnel. Well, that just means I'm going to hit another trigger in my marketing automation and send them a follow-up email again. Hey, Jim, I saw you went and checked out these pages. If you really want to talk, if you're interested in that product, why don't we put you in touch with sales? There's great stuff we can do here, and it's all driven by the tools working together and the data we can collect on the backside. So let's go through sort of the 4 phases of this thing that I think about and how to tie this all together, right? Awareness. I've got to generate interest. If you've got a huge brand or a small brand, you still need some brand equity and brand identity. Or you've got a product that's in the marketplace and it's a decent product name and people know it, still need to get out there and get something in front of people. They're not all going to search for my website or my product and show up through the front door. And as Pat showed, most of them are going to start at search engines. And we're usually looking to solve a problem first, right? If somebody knows my product, well, they should show up on my website, and I sure hope they buy it. But if they're searching to solve a problem, they're going to start in the search engines. They're going to talk to their friends. They're going to do that stuff. How many websites do each of you click on when you hit the Google when you're trying to solve a problem? You put in the search phrase the first way. There's one result, two results. I'll click on those. Okay, that didn't really solve the problem. I'll change my search term. I'll go a different direction. I'll click into sites and I'll click back. Right? I'll click all over the place. But what we want to do is we still need to create that awareness. We need to be in that conversation for all of us who do multiple searches and finally find the place we want to be. And what I want to do is I want to do this, in this case, via an ad, because with that ad, I can take them to a customized landing page that matches my ad. If I take an ad for somebody trying to solve a problem and I land them on my home page, I've just frustrated my user. And do you know why I frustrated that user? He now has to hunt on my website. Now, some people will do it. I've done it. I still do it. But what's much easier for me is if I take somebody who I know is interested because I've matched their intent to my ad and they've clicked on my ad, take them to a customized landing page that is part of the process for them to solve the problem. They can get there. Now, hold on, wait a minute. I've matched the ad and the landing page. What does that equal? A little bit of trust. I've got a little bit of trust? Well, great. I've got a little bit of trust. Guess what they're going to do next, folks? They're going to give up an email address because the download that I have available is another step in educating them to the point where they can solve this problem. So now we've had that first exchange. They've taken our download. We've collected their email address. They're in the funnel. And this isn't crazy stalking, and I'm not being a crazy advertiser. This is the way to people's hearts in a digital world. We need to nurture these things. Just like we do a relationship in the real world, we need to first, a little anecdote. I was out in a local pub with a friend last week, and awareness was key. The bartender really, really liked him. And he wasn't sure what was going on. And myself and the other guy that were with him made sure the bartender was aware that he was there. And so we did that. It was awareness, right? And in that social situation, awareness is the first part. But then it's that contact, right? And I'm not going to draw the corollary to dating this whole time. He did not get her phone number, but he has been back to the bar to see her again. But it's that contact, being invited for the second piece or developing that trust, right? So that's the key. So I want to return the trust in my nurture stream. I'm not going to go after they've downloaded the first white paper or how-to. My next email isn't going to be, hey, you came to our website. I think you should buy this. And that's a gross exaggeration of the real way it happens, but we do that a lot. We think that somebody showed interest, and automatically we're going to convert that. So I won't even make a dating example of that one. That would be a horrible example. So I won't go there. But this is the point. At the contact, we're not selling. If somebody wants to convert, I'm always going to have an option for them to convert, fill out the longer form, and convert if they choose to. But in this case, that first contact is going to be muted. Well, then I'm nurturing. I got to nurture the relationship, right? I've got to pick up the phone. I've got to make the call, set the date. I'm back to dating again. All right, I'll leave the dating behind. We'll use the plant here from Wally. Got to nurture that. That thing, you want to keep this relationship alive. So you're creating, when I talk about knowing your audience types, I know that many of you, if not all of you, understand a lot about who your buyer is. And so there's a couple of different personas that they fit. Create different nurture streams and different messages for people at different phases of the buying cycle, at different levels in the organization, or for different products and categories. It doesn't all have to be technical content. It has to be friendly content. We're trying to create a relationship here. So the one thing I talk about is don't make the download a list of specs, because you're not going to engage the user. Make it useful content to help them solve the problem. So this nurture piece, now this is the part where I won't make a corollary to dating, because that whole marketing automation, knowing what people are up to, that can be a little scary when I think of dating in the current world. But think about the conversion stage now. So if I've nurtured somebody appropriately, what have I got? I've got an easy conversion. So if I think about that, and I've taken 3 or 4 steps and they've engaged with my website, they've downloaded a couple of things, they've taken some necessary actions, and they have yet to opt out, they're ripe for conversion. So I want to seek the conversion at some point. And then what I do with conversions now, and especially with marketing automation, because you can tell what people are doing. In a perfect world, everybody that we're interested in selling a product to is going to show up and fill out the long form and want to have a conversation in the next 20 minutes. Unfortunately, in real life, that doesn't happen very often. So we actually categorize 2 different things. We talk about a suspect here, which is the graduated marketing lead. This is the person that's taken enough action to make us scratch our heads and say, wow, we should be selling to this person, but they haven't filled out a form. They go into one bucket. They're sort of that pre-qualified sales lead. But they're still a lead for sales because they've taken enough action. Now, yes, we could send another message via marketing automation, but what we can do there is annoy them. We want to go for sales. If we go for sales at this point, then we can find out. We can have sales pre-qualify these folks. But then there's also the qualified folk. That's somebody who fills out a form and says, yes, please call me tomorrow. Love those folks. They don't all convert, as you guys know, but those are my favorite kind of leads. But those suspects, the suspects here are the folks that are generally interested in our products and we're not doing enough with. So think about those folks that have done, even if you've got a decent marketing automation program, you know that folks are taking 3 or 4 steps and then visiting your website. Well, they haven't filled out a form, but make that leap. Graduate those guys. Move them over to sales and let sales do the dirty work there. Because sales is pretty good at finding out if those people are really qualified. And again, if they're not qualified, they can come back into the general population and they might qualify themselves again later. All right. Going to move on and talk about some key strategies for each of these different places. And then we should have, it looks like about 10 minutes left for Q&A. I'll try to get through this pretty quickly. Again, if you've got questions, I would love to answer them. And if I can't answer them, I'm just going to say, hey, Pat, how about a little help here, man? A little love for the brother. So paid media strategies. And I can't say this enough about paid media. It is and should be a test bed. Whether you're using display advertising, whether you're doing native advertising in LinkedIn with content, test the stuff. Some people think display ads don't work in this day and age. Display ads work great. Change your conversion idea. Display ads are top of funnel. They're awareness. They're not conversion. Their lower funnel is paid search, right? So think about where it's at in the funnel and think about this whole idea. Now, we can use display in our marketing automation ecosystem because we now know that a display ad drove a click. And maybe that click generated general interest, but then a paid search ad generated a click. So we know everything that's going on, so we know the contribution. And I'm not going to go off on the full-blown attribution modeling thing here because if I'm thinking about the data that I can get just from building this campaign, I don't need full-blown attribution. I'll do it. Don't get me wrong because I love data. I'm a geek that way. But I don't need all of that attribution. I just need to put this campaign in a little plastic case and let it run by itself, away from all of my other marketing activities. So think about that and test this stuff. Create multiple landing pages. A/B testing is getting easier and easier. Within HubSpot, I can create 2 landing pages in a heartbeat and change them very simply. Make sure you're matching your ad copy. If I've got a campaign that's very specific to a new product launch, I want to make sure my ad copy matches the ask of the user and or matches the landing page. So think about your ads and how you can make that happen. And then I'll dive into LinkedIn has opportunities for, well, custom audiences, first of all, which I'm not going to go into in detail, but if you haven't touched custom audiences, and it works in Facebook too, in Google for custom audiences, is where you have a list of people that you've contacted previously and you have email addresses. You can leverage those by uploading those into social media platforms, and you can then target similar audiences. You can let the engine do the work to target that audience that you have. And we're not talking about in-your-face ads. It just means that if that email shows up, your ad's going to get some preferential treatment. So we talk about these custom audiences. I can upload, if I've got 10,000 email addresses, I can upload them into Google. And now, granted, these people have to be logged into Google. That's one of the deals. And not all email addresses match if I upload things into Facebook. But think about the potential for somebody who's interested in your products already and using that as part of your paid media strategy for this campaign. I was working with a university not too long ago, and they had 50,000 email addresses that they're doing nothing with. Well, the little light bulb didn't take much to go off on that one. It's 50,000 emails that I can upload into Facebook. Where are college kids hanging out? Well, they're hanging out on Facebook. Yeah, they're on Twitter and some other things, but let's go run a test on Facebook and see how many of these people that we can at least get engaged in our product or our solution. It's pretty cool stuff. And sponsored content there, I can take the same download, I'll put it into my LinkedIn ad to get to the same landing page, but LinkedIn gives me a little better ad to show that in. And LinkedIn, think about your targeting. Who do I want? Who are the decision makers? Who's going to buy the product? Do I want the engineers? Do I want their bosses? Who in that organization, at what levels? I can use LinkedIn to target that, and then my ad for that content is going to show up only to that user group, which is pretty cool. And then they're going to click through to my custom landing page, and they're going to be willing, hopefully, to trade their email address to download that content. Safe environment. I've created a safe environment, and now we've got an exchange for future engagement. Landing page strategies. I can't tell you how often I still see landing pages that try to do way too much. Now, some organizations are governed, and they have to have lots of fields on their forms and things like that. I get it, and I understand it. But simplify the form. That's why exchanging the email address first works really, really well, because I don't have to give you my Social Security number and my shoe size to get the stinking download. Give me an email address. I'm happy to give up an email address. I've got half a dozen email addresses. I use them for different things. But you know what? If I'm really interested, eventually you're going to find out who I am. It works. So simplify your landing pages. Test your landing pages, right? People don't want to spend a lot of time filling out a form. They want to get the material they want, and they want to get out. Nurture strategies. We talked a lot about this. I think the key here is don't be pushy. We can certainly talk about the technical aspects of nurture streams. That's not sort of what this presentation is for, but absolutely there are other tips and tricks in nurture streams. But make sure your nurture streams are 3 or 4 steps deep. Make sure that you're qualifying the user at every step and giving them an option to move to the next step. Too often we take for granted that the user wants our product already because they downloaded something. So make sure that we're using the nurture streams to our advantage, and then we're also testing the messaging in that nurture stream. So if we're sending an email out to Susie again, we want to test that. And you know what? If we've got 2,000 Susies, let's send 1,000 Susies one message and 1,000 Susies the other message, and let's see which one resonates. And we can get that data. That data is available on the backside. We'll find out who clicked, who downloaded, who might have given us more information. So there's some really cool data that we can then use to drive the next version of that email or the next landing page that we're going to create for the next campaign. Finally, we get married to our strategies, and we get married to, oh, my paid search budget is $20,000 a month, and I've got a display budget of $50,000 a month. In this world, don't worry about shifting your strategy. So the idea is that if you've got a nimble strategy, move money across campaigns. Now, this is where attribution can certainly help, but also this ecosystem can help. If I've taken a $250,000 budget and I've said I'm building this ecosystem in this campaign and I want to advertise in this, and I have $250,000, I'm going to get 1,000 leads, great. I know what my CPL needs to be, and I can go to work. Don't be afraid to move the money. Performance at the end of the day here is about leads and revenue. It's not about my CPC. It's not about my clicks. That absolutely has something to do with it. And I'll say here something I say a lot is think about above the line and below the line reporting. The above the line reporting on this is where the big picture is. Yes, your agency or your partner needs to manage everything below the line to make sure this campaign's working, but think above the line. What's my investment? What's my requirement? And what do I need to do to realize that? And think about that as above the line. Now, below the line, all the day-to-day in line folks, they need to go beat up campaigns and they need to beat up campaign strategies. Fine, that needs to happen. But separate that reporting. Don't get lost in the minutia of it. My presentation is scheduled to end. I think I'm at the end, but my screen changed. So quickly, though, that was, I believe, my last slide. If not, there was just another picture of my smiling face. I do want to remind you that CFE Media has some great programs, and they've got some great people that can help you understand more about lead generation and marketing automation. Be Found Online is an agency that specializes in lead generation for B2B, as well as some other things, but we would love to have a follow-up conversation. Listen, I love informal coffee talks. Yes, I'm always looking to find some money at the end of the rainbow, but aren't we all? So if you do want to have a conversation, oh, there's a small X I can click out of the screen. Oops, coming back. Oh, there's the X. Thank you, Kristen. Kristen's awesome, isn't she? Get a round of applause for Kristen. With that, though, feel free to reach out to Pat and I. I do not want this to be a shameless sales pitch. What I do want to wrap up with is that I hope that I helped you fill in some gaps or identify some opportunities today, leveraging and thinking about the data that Pat presented about what your users are doing and how to shift a little bit of your marketing strategy to engage more of those folks, ultimately to bring them down the funnel. So with that, I think I'm going to turn it back over to Kristen for a little bit of housekeeping, and then, I hope we have time for some questions, but I'm sorry if I ran a little bit long, folks. We will answer them all, though.
Thanks, guys. That was a great presentation from both of you. If you guys have questions for today's presenters, please put them in the Ask a Question box on your screen. We'll get to a few right now, and any of the others that we don't have time for, we will get to after the webcast. As our presenters prepare for the Q&A, please take a look at the list of the Marketing to Engineers resources that we have on the screen right now. All these resources are linked from the PDF of this presentation, which you can download from the event resources on the left-hand side of your screen. And so now to get to just a few questions. Pat, I'm going to direct this one to you. Do you have any statistics around visitors' willingness to give up a name and email for different types of content, white papers, data sheets, software demos, videos, etc.?
Sure, I can chime in there. First, Steve, great job on the presentation as always. I enjoyed it as I always do. But in regards to the question, statistics about visitors' willingness to give up name and email address. So we did a study last year where we asked that specific question to engineers about how many fields of information are they willing to part with to download an asset, the asset being some sort of content piece. First, the top two items that they would download, content types, were register for webinars and webcasts, and also product data sheets and white papers were the top three. And in terms of number of fields, on average, there were about 5 fields of data was their pain threshold, right? And it was first name, last name, company name, email address. As Steve mentioned during his presentation, you should be willing to invest in your lead cycle and your sales time where you're not going to get everything up front. So in the research study, it actually shows that after 5 fields of data, when you get into fields, let's say 6 through 10, your chance of success drops below 50%. And once you get to, let's say, 10 fields of data, you're going to be down in the 20 percentile in terms of success for capturing that lead. So obviously, we all hope to have a better conversion rate than that, but if there's any questions about that specifically, I'd be happy to kind of take that one offline for the folks who asked that, and I can show you kind of that specific research on it. But that was kind of our findings from that one.
Thank you, Pat. We are going to have time for one other question, and I'm going to throw this out there for both you and Steve. Pat, what is your recommendation on progressive profiling for engineers?
Sure, I'll start and then probably have Steve wrap up. So progressive profiling for me, I think it ties into a lot of what Steve was talking about and what I do for CFE Media, which is develop a content marketing strategy. Is that you have to figure out not only who your audience is, why they buy your product, but also their content needs, right? What types or topics of content are they interested in? How long is their buy cycle? How well do you know your own buy cycle, right? If it's an electrical engineer and they have a 12-month buy cycle, going back to Steve's nurture stream or kind of the ability to nurture a lead, you got to figure out, well, at stage one, this prospect to us is almost a completely different entity than they are at the end. And we got to be prepared to deliver them content and messaging at stage one that is different than stage two. So I would start with the basics, figuring out who they are, why they buy your products, maybe why they buy your competitors' products, then go into almost an analysis of content marketing needs. What do they like content-wise, topic and type, and along their nurture stream or their buy cycle, how do their content needs shift? And I think with those things, even on a limited budget, you can kind of identify, okay, we see how this prospect really changes over time when we're trying to market and eventually sell them a product. But Steve, I don't know if you had anything you wanted to chime in there. That was kind of my take on it.
I think you're absolutely right, Pat. It's the idea of be careful with how much data you ask for. So if I'm gonna go back to my dating example, I can scare somebody away if I've just met my future wife or husband, and I ask too many questions, they're going to think I'm a little weird, and they're going to turn away, and they're not going to offer me that phone number, or they're going to give me the wrong phone number. I've had that happen a couple of 2-3 times. But if you think about it that way, think about how much information is the right information, you're going to have to test your way into this. Yes, there are best practices, but every industry and every company is a little bit different. Your users are different than my users, even if we make some of the same products. So think about it from that perspective and testing your way into that, and then let the data drive. Find out and test that stuff. And I'm gonna cheat a little bit here and answer Melissa's question about integrating with third-party tools. There are a lot of plugins for some of these. Do your homework on the marketing automation platform. Figure out what the priorities of your connections are to those things for the third-party platforms. There's a lot that's been built already. Sorry about that. Don't kick me, Kristen, too hard.
Thank you both for answering those questions. And unfortunately, we are out of time for today. But as we mentioned, we will be answering the rest of the questions offline with either the individual that asked it, or we'll also include it in the follow-up email that's sent out to everyone. If you guys enjoyed today's webcast, please join us in Chicago on Monday, March 21st for the 2016 Marketing Engineers event. The registration link is right there on your screen. It's also linked from the PDF version of this PowerPoint presentation. At the event, we will be releasing our new Marketing to Engineers study, and everyone who attends will receive a copy of that, plus all the speakers' presentations. So again, the link right there on your screen. Early bird registration ends on February 12th. Thanks again to our great speakers, Patrick Lynch and Steve Krull, for sharing their time and expertise. Now that we're just about done, we want to hear how we did. The exit survey will pop up on your screen as soon as this webcast ends. Please take a moment to complete it as we use this information to improve our webcast and plan for future marketing to engineers research studies. On behalf of CFE Media and Be Found Online, thanks for attending this webcast. This concludes our webcast. Have a great afternoon.